Good morning, everyone. It is great to be here with you. For those of you who might not recognize me, my name's Phil. I'm based over at our Shore Avenue site. I'm there pretty much every Sunday with my wife. We've got 4 kids, but it's great to be over this side of the city with you all this morning. I'm going to start by telling you about bedtime in our house. Because with 4 kids, they're all quite young. They're all at similar stages of life. They're all, between sort of 2 and 8. They all go to bed at similar times, which means that bedtime is carnage. It's absolute chaos trying to get them all into bed at the same time. But if there's one thing that I know is going to make this time even worse and even harder, it's Kat's parents being there. Because when Grandad comes, they know it is time for a story that is the end of all stories. And they can sit with him and they will utter these words, "Grandad, make up a story for us." And there they are, sat on the bed, dragging out this story time. And what starts off as like a nice, gentle story that they're all kind of like involved in, they're all there in, they all start chipping in their own ideas. They've all got their own things that want to happen. And soon they'll be in some sort of popcorn land that's covered in chocolate, flying off to the moon. And invariably at some point, Grandad will fall into a volcano. And they can drag this out for ages. They love to sit with their granddad, and they love to tell a story, they love to be involved in the story, and they want to make sure that they are in that story. They want to make sure that they are part of what's going on. And actually, we all love a good story, don't we? We all love stories, whether it's sat around the dinner table talking about what's been going on in our days, sat around a campfire, even things like Instagram. We all love stories. But what is it that makes them great? What are the ones that really stand out to us? I think they're the ones where, like my kids love to do, we can see ourselves in them. We can relate to the characters maybe. We can see a part of the story and think, oh yeah, I get what's going on. I can see how that reflects to life and the world that I experience around me. As we've been reading through the book of Micah, we've been reading a small part of a really big story, of God's story of creation, of making a world, of making people, of a journey that he's taking us all on so that one day there will be a day when his rule, his reign, his authority will be complete, where we will be with him in perfect love, in perfect relationship with him. And as we've read Micah, we've read a small part of this big story. And the part that we've read so far it's had its difficulties, hasn't it? It's had its challenges. There have been some things that we've read that have been quite difficult, quite hard to hear. A lot of what's come so far has been Micah warning. He's been saying, the way that you have been living as God's people isn't God's best. It's not what he's got in mind for you. God has got a better way for you to live. This isn't how I want the poor people to be treated. This is not how I want the broken people to be treated. Micah's spoken particularly into some situations about the people who were leading at the time. He's spoken about corrupt judges who would use their position and their power not to stand up for those who don't have a voice, for the marginalized, but instead to steal away their land and homes from them and give to those who already have more. He's spoken about false prophets at the time who would come alongside people who were rich and outwardly look like they're doing well and say, of course God's favor's on you. Look how well you're doing at life. Look at all this money. Look at all these riches that you have. Of course God wouldn't come and say you shouldn't be stealing from people because he's clearly blessing you. And Micah's saying, no, this is all wrong. You've got this backwards. This isn't what God's heart is. God's heart is that you should be giving this away to the poor and helping them, building them up and raising them up. And he particularly speaks to the leaders who should have been leading the people towards God. It says of them that they loved evil and hated good. That is how backwards God says that they've got it. That they've been doing all things wrong. There's been points where actually, as we've read through Micah, it's felt quite bleak. But interspersed along the way, there's been moments of hope. There's been moments where God speaks and really clearly says and reminds us He's reminding his people that there is a hope, that he sees all of what's going on, and this isn't his heart for them. This isn't the way that they should be being led. This isn't the way that they should be being cared for. There's something different to come. And now we get to the end, the last bit of Micah. And the picture that is now being painted for us is, why have we had to go through all of this? Why, God, have you done it this way? Why have you brought our enemies against us? Why did you let all of this happen? Why did you let Jerusalem get ruined? And Micah's now sharing this picture of what is to come and saying this was all worth it because what is to come is so much greater. It's so much more glorious than the pain and suffering that we've had to endure to get here. And so we're going to read now the last 10 or so verses of chapter 7. We're going to read from verse 11. A day will come for rebuilding your walls. On that day, your boundary will be extended. On that day, people will come to you from Assyria and the cities of Egypt, even from Egypt to the Euphrates River, and from sea to sea and mountain to mountain. Then the earth will become a wasteland because of its inhabitants and as a result of their actions. Shepherd your people with your staff, the flock that is your possession. They live alone in a woodland surrounded by pastures. Let them graze in Bashan and Gilead as in ancient times. I will perform miracles for them, as in the days of your exodus from the land of Egypt. Nations will be ashamed of all their power. They will put their hands over their mouths, and their ears will become deaf. They will lick the dust like a snake. They will come trembling out of their hiding places like reptiles slithering on the ground. They will tremble in the presence of the Lord our God. They will stand in awe of you. Who is a God like you, forgiving iniquity and passing over rebellion for the remnant of his inheritance? He does not hold on to his anger forever, because he delights in faithful love. He will again have compassion on us. He will vanquish our iniquities. You will cast all our sins into the depths of the sea. You will show loyalty to Jacob and faithful love to Abraham, as you swore to our fathers from days long ago. Jesus, I pray that you would open our hearts, open our eyes to see this picture that is being painted before us of the hope that is to come, of what we can look forward to, of what we're holding on to, but what we can taste and know and experience the goodness of now as well. I ask that in your name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. So we're going to jump just straight into verse 11 now. And it says, a day will come for rebuilding your walls, and on that day your boundary will be extended. So Micah's speaking here to a point when this is after the armies of Babylon, the nations of Babylon and Assyria have come through. They've come and they've done their destructive work. They've taken people out into exile. And once all of that is happening, God is saying, I'm going to rebuild my city. I'm going to rebuild it. There is a day coming when these walls are going to be rebuilt. The walls of a city are clearly very important. They're what mark it out. They're what define it. But they are also what offer it its protection. They're what mean that the people inside feel like and know that they're safe. If a city doesn't have walls, it's easy for its enemies to overcome it. But if you live in and around a city and your enemies come, you know that you can take refuge, you can take shelter in the city. It's a place that you can find sanctuary and safety in. So when God is telling us that he's going to rebuild his city, that the walls are going to be rebuilt again, he's reminding us that he is going to make a place for us to be safe, that we can know life with him, back united with him again, living in his presence. Jerusalem was the place where the Holy of Holies was, the temple. His presence dwelt there with his people. And he's saying, I'm going to restore my city to not just how it was before, but better than it was before. And it says, on that day, your boundary will be extended. As I read these texts, I like to kind of try and imagine what this looks like, because for me, that's how I find it easiest to kind of engage with it. I need to kind of form a mental picture of what's going on. And so as I picture kind of city walls being rebuilt, I'm imagining, towers, fortified gates, big sort of fortified cities with the nice little, bits that look like that going around the edge. And as these city walls are being built up, and it says your boundaries are extended, I can almost imagine the walls being moved out of this city as the city's expanded and made even bigger. And we know that there must be a truth to that, because there are going to be more people that are going to be returning to this city. As we read on, we'll hear how people from so many different nations are going to come and gather in this city. We know that the city is going to have to be bigger for the expanses, the many that are coming. But the boundaries of the city don't just refer to its physical walls. It also refers to the area, to the extent of that city's, and particularly that king's influence outside of the city. God here is painting for us a picture of his kingdom being expanded, the area that he rules and reigns over. It's not just the city itself where people will gather, but it's the area of his kingdom is going to be expanded. And as we hear this and as we read this, we should know that it's going to be something that is better than before. It's going to be so much bigger. When they heard this at the time, they might have thought about just the two nations being restored and God's influence there. Maybe they'd have thought of the whole of Israel and the tribes in the north and all of that being restored. But God is painting for us a picture of his kingdom extending out beyond all of that, of the nations coming. Verse 12 then. And on that day, when the city has been rebuilt, when my kingdom has been expanded and extended, on that day, people will come from Assyria and the cities of Egypt. For 6 chapters of Micah so far, every time we've heard that people are coming from Assyria, this has been bad news. This has been incoming armies, the people that are going to come and take over, that God is allowing to come in, and they're going to be the ones that are part of destroying God's city. When we think of Egypt, we think back to the time when the Israelites, they were slaves to the Egyptians. We're picturing 2 powerful nations here, and now we're being told that this is good news, that people from these countries are coming. It's no longer a bad thing. God has taken all the ideas of old and he's flipping them around. And what he's trying to say to us, he's painting this idea in our heads that now these people are coming because they want to be here. People from the most powerful nations are coming to a point where they're recognizing that Pharaoh, that their own gods aren't the right ones. They have seen that what God is building is the real thing, that he is the real deal, and they're coming back to him. And when it says from mountain to mountain and sea to sea, the idea that we should then have in our heads is the north, the south, the east, the west, everywhere that was known, the boundaries of what was known. It's people coming from everywhere. This should remind us of the promises that God made to Abraham when he said, you will be the father of many nations. This should make us think about Revelation when it says that people from every single nation, tribe and tongue will stand before the throne of God and worship him. And when all of that happens, the earth will become a wasteland because of its inhabitants and a result of their actions. That's verse 13. What we have here is a stark contrast. We've been painted this picture of God restoring his nation, of redeeming this city, this place where he lives with his people. And then outside of that, we've got this image of all the other nations being left bare. And there's two things that I think are really important to see in this. One of them is it says as a result of their actions. This isn't a call or an excuse or a reason for anyone to think we need to go out and be destructive. We need to tear down anything that's going on out in the world. This isn't something that's not what God is calling us to do. God calls us to love and care for people. And an extension of that is this should make us think about what it is that's appealing about God's city. What is it that is appealing about God? You know, Jesus in Matthew said we are to be a city on a hill. We're to be a light that shines into the darkness. We're to imagine this, that God's nation is there, that people are flocking to it because they can see it is light, it is hope, and it shines out into the other nations and calls people. It calls people out of the wasteland. It calls people out of the darkness, and it says, you are loved, you are wanted, you are welcome. There is a home for you here. No matter where you come from, no matter what your story is, no matter what your background is, no matter what you've been through, come and be part of my people. Come and be part of my story. Come and get involved in these promises. I want you. Micah seems to have all of this kind of suddenly become very alive to him because, you know, he's shared for so long through pain, through tears about the work that God is going to do, and that he's going to allow the enemies of the people to come through. That he is going to allow these other nations to destroy the city, to take people out into exile. And as he's shared this image now, this hope that we can have, this reminder of everything that is good that is still to come, it's like he suddenly goes, God, do it. Shepherd your people with your staff, the flock that is your possession. It's quite a thing to say, God, let your enemies come against us. Let all of this happen. But what he's seen, what he's had his eyes open to, is what is to come is better. And if that means that we are made uncomfortable, if that means that life has to get harder, if that means that, God, you need to use your staff to steer us in the right direction, then we want you to do that. We want you to step in our lives. If that means you have to make me uncomfortable, if I have to give up things that I've worked hard for, if it means that I have to give up on things, then God, do that. Because whatever happens, I want to be with you. There's nothing better. There's nothing more worthy. And I know my own propensity to wander. I know that I will look for the easy way. I will look to take the easy route when I can. But God, I don't want to end up in the wasteland. I don't want to end up out there. I don't want your people to end up out there. I don't want people to walk away from you and depart from you not knowing you. God, do this. Make our life harder if you need to, but whatever happens, do not let us not pursue you with everything we have. Do not let us not be in good relationship with you. Don't let that be the case, because I know I would rather the short-term pain of a life on this earth that was hard, but meant that I spend eternity with him, than had it easy now and had to live forever without him. Verse 15. God says, I will perform miracles for them, as in the days of your exodus from the land of Egypt. God's response to this is to remind his people of what he's already done. He says, look back. Remember the Exodus. Remember when I was the God who showed up and said, I value this group of slaves so much that I am going to rescue them and deliver them from the most powerful nation at the time. And he led them into an impossible situation. He positioned them between the sea and Pharaoh's armies. He put them there on purpose so that nobody could say, this was man's plan. Nobody could say, oh, this is what I achieved or what I did. But he put them in a situation where there was no way out and then said, look who the real God is. Look and see who I am. And he parted the waters and made a way for his people to pass through and be rescued and saved and delivered from Pharaoh. Only God could have done that. He made it that way on purpose so that Pharaoh and the surrounding nations would know that Yahweh, the God of the slaves, was the one true God. God is faithful. He is faithful. He wants to remind his people of that. And in response to that, Micah asks this question. It's verse 18. Who is a God like you? Who is like him? Who is a God like you, forgiving iniquity and passing over rebellion for the remnant of his inheritance? Who is there like our God? As we've read through Micah, and as we've heard about corruption, as we've heard about oppression, as we've heard about abuse of power and authority, we've read some challenging things. And it would be quite easy to look at them and go, I can't believe that people that are meant to be God's people would behave like that. But I know that I've also found, as we've read through it, that God's taken these same words and often held them up as a mirror to my own heart. And I'm not powerful enough or in enough of a good position that I can steal from the poor or go around killing people and taking land. But I know my own heart, and I know its ability to stay angry about things, to want to hold on to unforgiveness, to want to make a name for myself. I know the things that go on inside my own heart. And as I've been reading through this, as we've been working through this book, these words have held up a mirror. And as they do, they should cause us to realize that as much as God needed to purify his people then, he needs to purify us now. We need him to do something. And he promises that he will do. He says, I will give you a new heart. I will make you a new creation. He's not just talking about washing and wiping clean, but he's saying, I will make you brand new. And this new heart that he gives us, he promises to write his law upon it. It means that as we get to know him, as we're transformed more and more into his likeness, our story and his story become woven in together. Our desires and his desires become more and more aligned, and we live lives that become more and more like his. Verse 20. You will show loyalty to Jacob and faithful love to Abraham, as you swore to our fathers from days long ago. We are invited into God's story. God is faithful to the promises that he made. He reminds us, he's reminding his people of Abraham. Abraham, who he called to leave his family and said, I am going to bless you so that you can be a blessing, so that you can be the father of many nations. And we're part of that. He's reminding his people of Jacob, who through his sons, his people ended up in Egypt, where eventually they would become slaves. And through that time, God would show his mighty hand of deliverance and reveal to everyone around that he was the one true God. We're invited to be a part of that story, of the one where God is everything. It's his story. And so we all have decisions to make. Not just one-off ones, not just for a moment, but to follow him always, in all things, at all times. And it starts with choosing to follow him for the first time. And maybe you're here this morning and you've been coming along for a while, but you haven't yet chosen to follow him. You haven't yet made that decision that you want to do things his way, that you want to be part of his nation, that you want to be part of his people. This morning, he invites you to come and be a part of it. One of the things that we're doing together as a church soon is baptisms. Baptisms are a wonderful opportunity to not just be obedient to Jesus, because he said, believe and be baptized, but to stand in front of our friends, our family, our church, and say, God, I'm choosing your way. I'm choosing to do things your way. When you're baptized, you're fully immersed into the water and brought back out again. It symbolizes the old has gone and the new has come. It's a new birth. It's new life. And it's a picture of what God has already done on the inside. Maybe, though, at the moment, you're just finding it hard to hold on to these promises. And you feel like it's a bit of a bleak time. God's reminder is to look back. Look all the way back. Remember the Exodus. Remember the miracles that he performed, that he is faithful to his people, and out of the impossible situation, he works. Look forward to everything that Mike has been reminding us that will come, that we can know God, that we can live with him, and there will be a day when we meet him, when we see Jesus face to face and we're made completely like him. But also to look to the cross, because it's at the cross that this work was finished. Jesus says, it is finished. The ultimate judgment that God pours out wasn't poured out on us, but was poured out on him so that we didn't have to receive it. He made a way for us to be his people, for us to come out of the wastelands and into his kingdom, to be made right with him, to know him, to be loved by him. If I can get the band just to come up. I was on the train on Tuesday night up to London, and as we pulled into Vauxhall, there was a billboard up on the side, and it was an advert for Expedia. They're a travel company, if you don't know them. And it was a picture of a giant sand dune, and there's two people walking up this sand dune together. And it simply said this: you were made to transcend space and time. And I guess the idea of the advert is when you're on a hot, stuffy train into London, the idea of being anywhere else is probably quite appealing. But definitely the idea of, being out, walking in the deserts, enjoying the sunshine. But I realised that, and I'm pretty sure by accident, they got something absolutely spot on. We weren't made to live in this world like it is now. We weren't designed to live in a world that is full of sin and sickness and pain and suffering. And so when we're journeying through life together, when life feels hard, don't be surprised. When it's challenging and difficult, don't be shocked, because we weren't made for this. We were made to live in perfect unity and perfect harmony with God, in relationship with one another, love between each other. That's what we were really made for. And so when life is hard and it's difficult and it's challenging, remember that he is faithful to his promises. He will lead us through. He will never leave us or forsake us, but he remains with us always. Who is there like our God? Who is there like him? Why don't we stand, and just before we continue with a time of sung worship, I'm just going to read the last 3 verses of Micah for us one last time. It says this: Who is a God like you, forgiving iniquity and passing over rebellion for the remnant of his inheritance? He does not hold on to his anger forever, because he delights in faithful love. He will again have compassion on us. He will vanquish our iniquities. You will cast all our sins into the depths of the sea. You will show loyalty to Jacob and faithful love to Abraham, as you swore to our fathers from days long ago. God, there is no one like you. Let's worship.
Jesus, who is our Saviour, and